Hello, hello, people. Time for some WIP. Time for some work in progress feedback. Let's have a look what we have this week. We had a freaking amazing weekend at London for our first ever meetup. Freaking awesome. But it's also nice to be back in my cozy little nook here, giving you a weekly dose of feedback. So welcome everybody. Nice. Hi Brandoom. Hi Nikori. How are you both doing? You're both doing well. So, how many people do we have today? We got 9 people today, including Generius or Populus. No, not Populus. Sorry. Where are you? Generius. Here you are. Sorry that I forgot you the last time. So I think it's only justified that we start with you this time around, huh? Let's do that. Let's see. Grab my pen as well. As always, feel free to pitch in with any ideas or any bits of feedback that you might have yourself, right? Any ideas, anything at all, feel free to share anything. And if I'm talking about your work, feel free to pitch in. It's a conversation between the two of us, right? I know that there's like a little bit of a delay, so I try to keep that in mind too. But let's get into it. Oh, Brandoom is saying, doing great. How was the London visit? If only it was next month, then I could have come. It was freaking amazing. Like, I had a really good time. And honestly, I think I couldn't have expected it to go any better for like our first meetup ever. I think we walked around a bit too much. Like, we could have stayed a bit more static. But hey, like, all in all, like, that's the main thing that I can think of in terms of like feedback or complaints, whatever you want to call it. Other than that, it went really good. Absolutely loved meeting all the people. It's always interesting to see people live, right? That there's like an actual human being on the other end of like the voice chat, which is really nice. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of other people do too, because you can just tell by the smiles and the happy faces from the pictures. So I'm happy. And I think next year we're gonna do a meetup at Gamescom. So that's already kind of in the works. As our next location for the meetup. So we'll see. Excited about that one too. Heyo, Darian. Welcome to the chat. Okay. Anyway, let's dive into some feedback here. Generius is asking, I think it's definitely getting better. Are there still parts which need refinement? Let's have a quick look. I think honestly, we're pretty much at the end. You know? Pretty much at the end. Yeah. I like the way that the picture is balanced now, right? Like, I'm trying to take like a distant look as well. I like that the way the picture is balanced now. So, yeah. I think this one is good. There's nothing really that jumps out to me at this point anymore, you know? So I think it's good to move on. I guess the only thing, you see, if you compare it to the previous one, right? Yeah, so you filled up the space a little bit more. So that's good. Yeah, no. I think this is good, Generius. Sorry to keep you waiting for that long just to hear me say that it's good. I was basically going to say the same last time, but I completely skipped you for whatever reason. I think I was just rushing too much last time. So apologies for that. Save that out, and then we're going to jump straight to French fries over here. Oh, brand doom. I gotta put that on my calendar then. Yes, do it. Do it, do it. I think it's gonna be awesome. It's a little bit different compared to EGX, right? I mean, it's a lot different compared to EGX. EGX is kind of like nice and small in like a good way. Some people thought that it was like too small actually to have like a lot of substance to it, which I do agree with. But like I personally don't really go to like conferences to just play games or anything like that, you know? I'm just there to like meet people and like socialize a little bit, like instead of basically being the consumer, right? Like I'm just there to meet people. But yeah, which is I mean, it's also like Gamescom is like 10 times the size, I think. So yeah, a lot more to do. So I'm curious how that one is gonna go, because that also means that we're gonna get lose track of each other more quickly as well. But we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, French fries. Let's have a look. Currently working on the mood and the color of my scene. The next step will be to replace my placeholder assets with more detailed assets. I would appreciate some feedback on the following questions. I think I'm stuck with the color. I like them, but it still feels like something is weird on them. Can you recommend me some ways to continue with them, or do you recognize some crucial parts to fix? And then the second question is, would you recommend to still work on the light, color, and the mood of the scene, or finally start to add some finished assets? So I'm actually going to combine the two into one. Because the thing is, like, a scene and all the components of a scene are always going to be work in progress, and you're always going to be fine-tuning, like, bits as they come in, right? So what I mean by this is that this gives you, like, a good indication of the colors, right? It gives you, like, a good indication on, like, what's going to stand out, and you kind of have, like, the... let's see. You kind of have, like, the little light beams coming down, right? Like the God rays. And that's already good. I think I would probably like rotate them a little bit more there so that they're kind of focused on the main element. Just a bit more. However, what I was going to say is that art is all about iteration. So you can't really expect to already have like finished your mood or finished your lighting at this stage. Because I'm a big believer in like just iteration. So this is awesome, right? The current state of your scene is really awesome and it is a good base, but you just need to keep working on it. And the way... So let's make a note here, right? So iteration. And the way that I do it, the way that I do iteration in my scenes, and this is something personal, right? But this is something that I feel worked for me, is that whenever I feel like I'm stuck with one thing, I'll move to something else. So let's say for now, you're stuck with the color, right? You don't really know what to do. Cool, leave the color for now and start iterating on the assets. And then once you're kind of done like iterating on the assets, or you're like done as in like tired for a little bit, go back to the color and tweak the colors, right? Because what you're doing is if you keep staring at one thing for long enough, like whichever aspect that may be, you're gonna go into a sort of tunnel vision. And you're gonna push yourself into this tunnel vision mindset where you don't really know what you're doing at a certain point. That means that you need to break that cycle and just focus on something else instead. So avoid tunnel vision. Because tunnel vision is something that once you're into it, like you don't really know what you're doing anymore to a certain degree, right? Like you're just focused on the one thing, but you're not seeing the bigger picture anymore. So whenever you notice that you're getting into that routine, you got to break that cycle and do something else. So that would mean the next steps is just start refining the assets. And then move back to color, mood, etc. Right? Like color, light, mood. And what you're doing with that is that you keep switching between the two. So let's say you've done a pass on like the majority of the assets, right? You get back into light. Okay, cool. You're trying to tweak the light, seeing how they correspond to like what you did with the assets, right? Because they're also gonna be living off like the adjustments that you did with the assets too. And you can kind of see the same thing with your scene already, right? You had like a very bright scene in the beginning, but now that we started adding the color into it, we kind of lost something there, right? Like it doesn't feel as bright and as like vibrant as it did before. And you can kind of tweak that with like a whole bunch of things, right? But for now, I would say this is a good color block out. And just, yeah, go forward with like refining the assets. Then I'm going to take a next step, right? So if you want to solve the issues that you're currently feeling like, you got to be aware of something that's very Lumen specific, right? Lumen really feeds off the base color information that you add onto your assets. So that means that if you have a darker base color, you're going to get less bounce light because Lumen has less color values to like bounce around the scene, right? So be very careful with like how dark or how bright you make something, because that has like a dramatic impact on your scene and how it feels. And in this case, you know, let me see if I can still find your original concept. Add. No, so there's no original concept, right? But I think for a scene like this, I think you want to go for brighter base colors because you want to make it feel like very light, very vibrant, right? So you got to push them up. Push up the values for the base color. In this case. Yeah. Well, like I was saying before, it's all about iteration, right? That's the name of the game. Like inside of a studio, you're also going to be iterating. You're gonna show off like different stages of the process, and depending on the stage of the process, there might be different kinds of feedback. So already start applying that in here. So iteration is super important. Super important. Let me see if I can pick something else out from your question. Stuck with the color. You recommend some crucial parts to fix. Yeah, so we kind of talked about like just like a generic like pushing up the base color values, right? So that you get more light being bounced around in your scene. What could also really work is that you make the values of the bonsai, you make them slightly brighter than some of the other values in your scene, so that you have like sort of like a built-in color contrast. I would say you could experiment with that now, right? But I would probably keep that for like a later stage. But it's something to think about, right? It kind of harkens back to the conversation that we had last time when I was focusing like really on the art fundamentals, right? And how to make things stand out. Might be one of the options. Yeah. But the main thing here is, from your questions, is already start working on the final assets and like iterate. Because things are gonna change, things are gonna move around. That's totally fine. And also, like you're doing right now, take regular screenshots, right? Because like regular screenshots allow you to see what got lost and what got improved as well. So Yeah, I'll add that here. Regular screenshots. Ding. Randoom is saying, this looks cozy. I like how the plants frame the shot. Yeah, I like it too. There's a nice cozy composition to it. I like it. But that's about it. Don't worry about getting everything perfect. Like, art is something that's born out of like iteration, right? So that's the main thing that I want to get across. That's why I'm hammering on that point so much. So keep going after it. Keep tweaking it as you see things progress. And trust the process. That's all I'll say. Because it's looking good. Hey, Guillaume! How's it going, buddy? Thank you so much for posting your work again, French fries. Keep up the great work. I love all the updates that you're doing. Yeah. Yeah, I like where your iterations are going, right? Like the progression that you're making is like you're doing a lot of good tweaks here. Yep. Cool. Cool. Nice. Thank you so much again, French fries, for posting your work. And we go to one of our newer members of the community. Hi, Nadia. Thank you so much for joining our community. And thank you for posting your work. Let's have a look. So this is a graduation project. You're making a 3D environment for a weapon shop. The shop is owned by a wandering merchant who came across the ruin of an old building and decided to stay. Nice. The concept is made by me, but it isn't going to be the final piece. I won't have the one camera angle to work because it needs to be an in-game environment. Okay. The game needed to be an interactive element. Okay, so it has to kind of be like interactive a little bit for the school. During this project, I would love feedback on the block out, the layout, and everything environment art related. Okay, let's see. There's a second post as well. Like feedback on the layout, the block out spacing, and if there's enough space. Should it be bigger or smaller? If there's anything misplaced or clear, I think you can think about the topic. Okay. So, there's a video with it as well. But I think skip through the video. Pick up the sword. That's cool. Alright. The video doesn't really show that much, you know, it just shows the interaction, so we're gonna go with the screenshot here. So the block out, the spacing, and yeah, should it be bigger, should it be smaller? Okay. Nice. So the thing that I like is that you did like your own little like drawing, right? Like a little concept. This looks great. So it's kind of flipped the other way around, right? What I would do is think more in terms of islands, right? Like little clusters of things. So you have like a nice little cluster happening here, but the rest of it feels pretty scattered, right? So what you could do is like you probably want to space things out just a little bit, right? So for example, what I'm thinking, I'm kind of going with my gut here, right? Is that you have like the two mannequins like all the way to the side. Maybe you could have like 3 of them. Right? You can have like the 3 mannequins all the way to the side. So you pick up your sword, you run here. It's like a bit of an open space. And then you could have like the fencing. Let's see. How are we gonna do the fencing? Probably remove this guy. Because if you already have this, right, that kind of serves the same purpose. So, unless... I don't think you really need this guy here. And then just fill it up with, like, more fences, I think. Okay, and then maybe... we could have the flags on the end instead. Remove this guy. Like, move it basically, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create like a little bit more separation between like all the different sides of the environment, right? So that you have like the shop side, right? Like the shop and the furnace side, and then you have like the trading grounds. And I'm just trying to push the divide a little bit more so that it's clearer. So what I might do is, let's see. What could also be cool. Let's see. Let's start with one thing first, right? Like, I'm thinking that it could be nice to do the same thing here, right? Like, move it a little bit closer. So that the furnace is almost like either incorporated with the wall. Maybe here somewhere, right? Like the thing is kind of peeking through. Maybe the fabric or something like that, right? Right. Again, I'm just trying to condense the two things, right? So it's kind of like incorporated with the wall a little bit. It's more integral to the space itself. And then you could have, because you also need to think about like what is this shop made out of, right? Because you have a table, but that table is probably not there unless he brought it with him, right? Or like they brought it with them. The same for the chest, right? So maybe just gonna make some random notes, right? So maybe he has a cart to show that he's traveling, right? Just an indication. Feels like it's kind of missing to like indicate that he was traveling at some point. And then all the furniture is handmade, right? That might be the case here, right? It's just like an indication of a table. Yeah. And then what you could do with the wall is also make it like it's still, you can still see the foundations of the wall in certain pieces. Right, so that you're getting like a wall section here that's then broken up. And then do the same thing maybe here, so that it still looks like there's like a bit of the wall that's just there. And then maybe even, I don't know, have like some places of the foundation still there, right? And then maybe, kind of thinking on the top of my brain, right? Like if you still have some pieces of the foundation, maybe you could turn that kind of into where he could put like, or they could put like some flags or something like that too. Or like the poles of the fabric, right? The poles of the roof that he built. Like, could be nice if there's like a bunch of rubble next to it, or like stones next to it. Let's see. So I'm trying to condense all these things a little bit more, right? You could probably have, what I like to do in my environment as well is I have like these wooden fences, right? And then have them like occasionally swap out with like the stone fences or like the stone walls that might still be there. You know, so you could have like a stone wall that's still left again. Then it kind of goes into like a little corner. Then it goes down again. And then you could switch it out with like some fences again. And so showcasing with all of the stuff that I'm doing is I'm trying to showcase like the story, right? Like the nice story that you put in there, like an old ruin of a building. Okay, let's elevate that a little. Let's make sure that people get that this is like an old ruin of a building. Yeah, but just showcasing that there's still like foundational pieces of the building that are there. It'd be like really nice to show that off. Right, and kind of massaging that into the fabric of your environment, right? So we kind of have more ruined walls, foundations, right? Indicate travel. With a cart or something like that, right? Like a cart was just an example, but there's other ways that you can do that too. And then also, mainly what we've been talking about is space things out. And when you do so, when you're spacing things out, because I'm trying to create like a separation between like the shop area and like the trading area, right? Just to make sure that they're like completely self-sustained. Try to work in clusters. So create like neat little spaces that have like a bunch of assets together. Something like you're doing here, right? Like this cluster feels really nice. This is getting there as well. And that's just for the sake of the 30-70%, right? Where like 70% is like clean and 30% is noise. It allows people, when they're looking at something, to easily focus on some areas, right? Because people are attracted to details, people are attracted to stuff. So that could be, again, it's a nice way to like guide people, right? So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make it dense, and I'm trying to make this dense as well, so that we have like a little bit of safe space in between, and then you can focus on either or, right? But I think the shop is naturally going to be like the densest area. Random is saying, on the tent, don't forget to add ropes and stakes in the corners to secure it. Also, if it's rainy, look out for the dips in the tent where the water can pool. As someone who camps a lot, that sticks out to me. Yeah, that's a good shout. I think just making sure that this structure is a little bit more secured, right? And this is actually like a very interesting point, because like how secure this tent is. Oh. This has like a direct correlation to like how long he has been there, which you can use to your advantage, right? Because this looks like it's literally just set up and he's been there for like a couple of days, right? But let's say there's like a proper wooden frame around it, and there's like a bunch of tarps that like are interlaced, and you can see that there's like a lot of time spent on it, right? You can kind of use the assets and how they look as like an indication of the story, right? So keep that in mind. You're doing it. Let's see. But your questions were, is there enough space? Should we be smaller or bigger? And is there anything misplaced or not? So we kind of talked about like the non-clear part, right? I think you can emphasize more of the story that you've laid out so beautifully to us. When it comes to enough space, I think the space is actually fine. I think it's just the clustering of it, right? Other than that, you have enough space to play around with. Like, this is great. So, yeah. It's looking good. Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna keep it to that because that's mostly what you were talking about anyway, Nadia. So thank you so much for posting your work. And I'm really looking forward to see what you're gonna do with this, you know? It's a nice, cozy concept. I like that you drew it yourself as well. And it just shows, you know, like this is really nice. But you don't need that much to really like put an idea from your brain onto paper, right? Yeah. It's gonna be awesome. Thank you for posting your work as well. And also welcome to the community. All right. Then we're moving on to Giovanni. Let's have a look. Where's your post? The ArtStation Challenge. It's been a while since I haven't been able to work on the scene as much, but this is how it's going so far. So changing. While I'm working on the props and the textures, I added the WIP Wednesday tag to get some feedback on what could make the scene more interesting. The houses are all there, and overall it's looking like the concept, but I think it looks a little bit bland, especially the houses on the right and the path to the temple. Yes, okay. And the path to the temple. Yeah. I see what you mean. Okay, so let's do a comparison, right? Because you brought it up yourself. Like, if we look at the houses on the left, like, what they have is interesting detail. Hey, Toritor! Hey, Giovanni! Welcome, welcome. Right on time, Giovanni. So these buildings have interesting detail, right? So they have, like, a wooden frame, and they have some, like, timber frames and, like, wooden planks on them, which makes them feel believable, right? And that's what we're aiming for when it comes to 3D. Whenever you make something that's, like, just a solid chunk of, let's say, metal, question mark? Well, it's not metal. I'm guessing that it's concrete. But it's really hard to convince me that this is like a real house with like a real house built out of like real materials, right? There's no separation between materials. There's no realism really added to it. So I think a quick way to add something to that is kind of what you're doing here, right? Where you add like a timber frame to it. And then maybe also play with the available materials that you have at hand, where you have like these corrugated metal pieces, and then just build up something with them, right? So let's say on the corner you have your wooden beams. You have like, I don't know, a wooden beam going this way. You have like another wooden beam here. You kind of need to make stuff up with like the stuff that you have on hands, right? Try to think like in a very modular way. I'm just like, okay, cool. Let's add like a corrugated metal sheet. Maybe add another one. Hey, Lorenzo! Yeah, I think that's the crux of it, right? Like, these houses don't feel real because that's not what a house is supposed to look like. Where this is more believable because that's like an actual structure to a house, right? And if you want to I thought of making another concrete color. Maybe do some vertex painting too to add some patches to the walls. I don't think it's necessarily the patches, right? I mean, the material itself doesn't really look great anyway, if I'm being honest. Right? The material itself can be improved. Where it doesn't really know what it's supposed to be really. But you can kind of fix that with like some separations too. Or maybe even, let's see, would be like a good option here. I'm trying to think about like simple solutions, right? The simple solution is definitely adding the timber frames to it. That already helps a lot. Maybe revealing brick underneath it. That instead of vertex painting different patches of concrete, right? Because it's only gonna add like noise and like a different color to it. So that's not really fixing the core issue, but something that adds like a structural logic to it might work here, right? So maybe doing patches where you can see like the brickwork underneath it could potentially work. Or, you know, like just model more stuff onto it, right? Where if you look at buildings, like usually they have, was it like a little overhang here. Maybe you could have like the door frame itself is set in a different material. And then maybe they have like a border at the bottom, you know, that goes all the way around and is a slightly different material. That at least you have like a separation between those two things. That might work as well. It's all about the structure. Like look at what real life houses look like and try to replicate those. Let's see. Yeah, the concept feels like it's like put together like it's almost like a favela, right? Like just built out of stuff that people had on hand. So like wooden planks or paneling or something like that. It feels like very put together with random stuff. Trying to think like that, right? So look into the building construction. That would be like 0.1. Let's have a look. Some of the other pieces. Land. Especially the houses on the right and the path to the temple. Yeah, I think, let me have a look at the concept. Yeah, with the path to the temple, you're gonna have to do something with that, right? Like either have like a stone path or something like that, or yeah, just something. Because it is just sand. So just having something there that looks like a path is already gonna do a lot. Then maybe with a let's see, maybe with another path you could indicate like a crossroads kind of thing, right? You could have like another path like merging into it or something like that. Yeah. I think the way, so in general, right, the way that I always approach this, especially because time is of the essence with a challenge, I will look at what's available and see if I can make like really quick wins with the stuff that I have, depending on how much time you still have left. Challenge. Okay. I actually have a Mm. Let's see. Until the 23rd of October. Okay, so... Is that right? 11 days? Oh, registration ends. Okay, so we still have 11 days. I would say, at this point... Okay, so at this point, what I would be doing is, like, I would try to cobble stuff together already. Because, let's do, like, a breakdown of your timeline, right? Let's have a quick look at it. Well, let's say 11 days. That's your total time. If you want to make like a bunch of new materials for the scene here, might take you like a couple of days, right? To make all the buildings look good, and then maybe make this building in the back look good. Yeah. Let's say 3 days. And then you might still need to do like a whole bunch of stuff to the scene otherwise anyway, right? So I would honestly not spend any more time on like making materials and just tweaking the ones that are already there, and then already start like cobbling stuff together with what we talked about today, right? You have a kit of wooden beams. Okay, it's time to just use that kit more, you know? Like maybe so you already have a wooden house here. You don't really have like a, well, I kind of have like a wooden house underneath here. But I would, yeah, at this point, I would just start putting stuff together. So this can be a wooden house for now. You know, kind of ditch how it looks in the concept. We're just gonna run with what is gonna make it work for us, right? Because, I mean, you still have all this stuff to do too, right? So if we focus on like what would needed to be done is, oh god, what are we gonna do? So let's say 1 day for the back building. Cool. 2 days. 2 days. Let's say 2 to 3 days for the props up front. Because they're gonna be foreground, right? So they're gonna be more important than the building in the back. You can get away with a lot of stuff on the building in the back, but you can't do that if you have something up close. Unless if you're gonna hide it in light or like in darkness, but you're probably not gonna do that because you have like light shining there, right? So foreground props, 2 to 3 days. And let's say we have 4 days that we already took out of the budget. That means that 7 days. Let's say 2 days. Two days I would just take for filling out the scene. Like making the path, like decorating all the buildings, making the buildings in the back, like doing the big buildings in the back. Trying to just get something in there. And then take the rest of your time budget to do post. Post, lighting, atmosphere, all that kind of stuff. So let's see, what do we get? So 1, 4, 6. So 5 days. 5 days for post, lighting, atmosphere, and still like some missing bits. Right? Let's say polish. That's the way that I would do it. But even with this quick explanation, you can see that you don't really have too much time to think about the buildings that are going to be on the right. So what I would do is I would just dress them up really quick. Try to find ways to not have them highlighted as much as they are now. Especially with the lighting, right? Try to hide them a little bit more. Like reduce the amount of light that you have here. And just put all the focus here on one point. Rather than trying to spread it around the whole scene. That's the way that I would approach it. Let's see, as in your concept. I don't think I'll finish until the deadline, so my goal is to do the most I can until then and keep on working on it. So this is actually an interesting one with challenges. I don't think I would recommend that. Personally, right? Because I feel like, look, you're gonna give it your all for the challenge, but that means that you're also gonna be taking shortcuts and like rushing a lot of it, right? Whereas I personally think that if you just do the best you can within the timeline that you're given, and whatever it ends up with, that's good. But after the fact, just do something new. Because the whole reason to me, and this is personal, right? If you still want to keep working on it, I'm not trying to scare you away from it. But like, logically, the way that I think about it is that you spend so much time taking shortcuts for like a challenge piece that most of your time afterwards, where you want to really polish it, is gonna be really held back by the amount of shortcuts that you took before, right? So the scene is never gonna end up with proper foundations because it's a challenge. That's where I'm coming from. You can, right? But I think it's gonna take a lot longer to like then polish it afterwards, rather than doing something, just taking what you learned and doing something new. My opinion, though. Let's see. Was there something else? I think that's it, right? The houses are all there, and overall the concept, but it's looking a bit bland. Yeah, that's what I would do. Like, yep, that's a quick overview of how I would approach it, Giovanni. So good luck. Good luck, and I'm curious to see what you're gonna do with it, you know? Where you're gonna take it. Makes sense too, thanks Sim. Yeah, no worries. It's always a difficult one. Difficult. But hey, look, like I've participated in 3 challenges, and I absolutely failed 2 of them. I'm not saying that this is a failure by any stretch of the imagination, right? But like, in my case, like I just learned so much from like overestimating my ability and then going into it and then realizing that, okay, next time I'm not gonna take it as big. I'm just gonna, I know what I'm doing a bit better than I was doing before. So that's what these challenges are for, in my opinion. So good for that. Okay, next up we got Yutar. I think you're new in the community as well, so welcome. I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3, therefore I wanted to create a campsite like in the game. I'm planning to sculpt the gate and hit it with a light beam from the opening at the top. Right now I'm not sure about the camera placement, and the area might feel too crowded or too small, therefore I should create a bigger ground. Okay, so let's see here. So this is a ref, people that are wondering, just to make sure. Then we got the door here, which is looking quite nice. Like it. We got like a tent block out coming in as well. What I would honestly do with something like this is screw the amount of tents. Just make one of them and make it look like really good. I honestly think that you have the perfect reference here. Just in terms of like what your scene should be. Like, This is like the perfect scale and scope ref to me. Like it's one tent that looks like really nicely decorated, has like all the accoutrements that you could want. You know, you can tell a little story within the tent. You could even, if you're gonna go up close, you could even go like higher quality than they have, right? Because to them it's a third person game, like a top down game, so the camera is always gonna be like longer distance. But I think it could be really cool if, let's say, this is your camera angle instead. The reason why I'm saying that as well, to explain myself a little bit, is because you're gonna create like one really nice tent over here, right? And then you have to do the same thing again over here, and the same thing again over here, and the same thing again over here. But you're basically doing the same thing just 4 times in this environment. But you're not really gaining too much with it, right? So what I would do, the approach that I would take, is just make this one first. If you still want to do it after that, if you still want to like scale it up and like have more in your scene, totally fine. Keep working on it, right? But make sure that this one is done first. Then maybe like incorporate like 3 of them. Right? So this could be like your second try. And then maybe after that point, like if you still want to keep working on it, you could do like number 3. So you're basically starting from like the MVP, like the minimum viable product. And then you're building your way out. Because what I've seen time and time again is that you have this really cool idea and you're like really motivated because you're playing a game. But making an environment like this is always going to take pretty long, right? Especially if you want to get the details right and you want to get it on your portfolio. So start small. And if you're still not tired of it, scale up after that. But start small. See, that's looking good. Also, yeah, because I saw your other post. Look into like modular workflows, right? Not everything should be uniquely sculpted, so try and find ways where you can make shortcuts in your scene. So for example, you know, like all the wood stuff could be a trim sheet. Like all the paper stuff, like you can have the books and the parchments and all that stuff, like all on the same kind of like texture atlas, right? Try to look for ways to modularize your scene as much as possible. Yeah. Start small and then scale up. Because yeah, when it comes to camera placement as well, I think a camera shot like this could be like really interesting. Because you can do so much cool stuff with it. Like, so you have this camp, right? And you could kind of focus on the story first. And let's say the story is like, okay, someone built their camp because they really want to go into this little dungeon over here, right? So this is the little camp, and you could have like the door slightly open with like light coming out of it. And you could almost make it so that like the two are interconnected between each other, right? Because you could make the thing where someone set up camp and now they're exploring the dungeon. You could set up something like that. So think about the story with this one. And then keep on expanding on it afterwards if you want to, right? That would be my 2 cents for this, like in terms of feedback. Start small, think modular, and incorporate a story. Okay, so let's summarize it. Start small. Keep modularity in mind. And then storytelling. That's the way that I would think about it. But the stuff that you're making already looks really interesting. I like what you're doing with the sculpt. Sculpt looks interesting. Watch out for like the detail points, right? Where you have like bits of intersection happening. Make sure that it looks like the gate actually has like functioning, whatever the name is. Charnieren. Yeah, rotation points, right? Where you basically have like the joints here that make like the doors rotate. Whatever they look like on medieval doors. Make sure that you incorporate those. But yeah. The stuff here itself looks really nice. Really nice. Don't forget to focus on the big picture with stuff like this, right? That's why I brought up like the fact of modularity as well. You're not gonna be able to do everything unique in a scene like this. I mean, you can, but it's gonna take you like way longer than what it otherwise would be. Yeah. Start small, focus on modularity, and have a story in there. Those are the two, or like the 3 takeaways for you in this case. Then we're gonna move straight on up to Lorenzo. Lorenzo is back with his little hideout. Finish the floor, change the lighting. Actually, I think I'm close to finishing this project. I need to add a missing flags. Yeah, cool. So I tried something else, but the square format is probably not good. Square never works. Like, a square always looks awkward unless it's for a thumbnail. Like there's you can see that in nature, right? Like, people always gravitate towards like rectangular shapes. And that's why the golden ratio exists, right? Yeah. Don't do square format. Unless for thumbnails, then it's fine. Yeah. I mean, I don't really see any questions in there, so yeah. Apart from the square format test, that's all I'll probably have to. Oh wait, so maybe it's too dark. Yeah, I think honestly your lighting, your concept has like a really interesting lighting. And I think something changed in between the last shot that you had, which was like pretty on point with the concept, and then this one. This one seems darker as well. So I think honestly it's just a case of like increasing your bounce light, or like, what's it called on your lighting, on your lights, your indirect. Your indirect lighting could use like a little bit of a boost. That would be like the quick fix, I think, where you have just more bounce light. Yeah. Otherwise, keep it up, man. I like what I'm seeing here. I like the bullet holes. I like that they have like a little bit of a flair to them as well. I like it. Yeah, I do agree overall that it's like a bit too dark now. Yeah. Also, pay attention to like the small details, right? Details like this fabric being like super straight always makes everything look 3D. So just adding like a little bit more geo and making it feel like it's actual fabric always help. And this can be applied to like a bunch of things, right? Yeah. Keep it up, Lorenzo. Keep it up. Next up, we're gonna look at this beautiful vegetation from Luke. Luke is asking for feedback for lighting placement, lighting / placement of foliage, and general composition. Alium, what up? How's it going? Yeah, I mean, general composition is quite nice. You know, feels very peaceful. The only thing that I really have to say about this is that it would be nice to have like more breakup in the grass. That's the first thing that really came to mind. Just so that we can see like a little bit more patchiness, you know? So that you have like a couple of empty spots in there. Or maybe like a couple of spots where it's not as densely populated. Stuff like this always looks really nice, you know? You have like dense area. Then you have like some more patchy stuff. That always looks interesting, especially if you really want to emphasize it, like around the corners, you know, that could look really nice because you look like you have like a bunch of stones in there too. So that would make like logical sense as well, where you have like a little bit more patchiness because there's like stones and there's like soil that's like more difficult for grass to grow on, right? You kind of have like a gradient, like a slight gradient that has like, I don't know, a couple of sections in them that are like kind of offset. And maybe like a couple of patches here, you know, because it goes into like some rocky soil again. Yeah, that's mainly it. Honestly, the rest of it looks really nice. That's all I can think about. If you what might also be nice, you could have like bits of dead grass as well, like on the edges. Where you just pick like a couple of patches and they're like just yellow and maybe like a little bit more flattened. Because we are focusing on like a lot of detail, right? Like some patches of like dead grass in there. Not dead. You could have like partially like wilted or whatever you want to call it, right? Like something in there. Look really interesting. Yeah, it's a cool little project. I always a fan of like these like presentations. It's like the white background kind of at the end of it. Looks nice. Right. Cool. Great job, Luke. Really cool. I like the changes that you've made from the beginning as well. Like you're really leveling this up. Okay. Hey, Antonio. How's it going? And we're going to jump into Netrix design. No, don't say flattened. Oh. Okay. Let's have a look here. First of all, welcome to the community. And you're looking for feedback on the overall composition, the concept, and the block out. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one because this is your own concept. This is gonna be a tricky one. So I'm gonna be like as transparent as I can be with this, right? In terms of what I really think about it. Because I do have like a lot of questions with this. Is the concept, right? Why here? And I mean that in terms of why this location? Why is there like a settlement that's like next to like a windmill? Because windmills are usually secluded from like the rest of the population, right? But like it's also at the edge of a desert with like some abandoned stuff. Here? Well, I guess the concept itself doesn't really make too much sense, right? Like it's also, it doesn't really tell an interesting story to me. Because it feels like it's at the edge of a desert, but it's also like still like heavily populated, even though it's not really, right? Because there's normal houses here. I mean, I'm probably looking into the background a bit too much. But it just doesn't really make sense why there would be like a bit of civilization here, like in the middle of the desert next to a windmill. And this is also a good reminder. I mean, I don't really know like another way to say this, right? But like there is, that's also the reason why it's like a whole different specialization, right? Someone who focuses on the concepts and is like a concept artist who comes up with the ideas for an environment is usually completely separated from the person who's going to execute on those ideas. Because there's a lot of things to go into, especially when it comes to world building, right? Like you have a couple of ideas that are, you put them together, but they don't really match, or they don't form like a cohesive story structure, right? It doesn't really make sense. So, and since we're kind of early in the process, I'm gonna do I'm gonna give you like an extreme suggestion, right? But I wouldn't do this as a concept, because what is gonna happen is you're gonna have to do so many iterations to kind of fix what you did in the concept later on. And it's probably better to look for a concept that you like, that has like all the world building that you need, and then build upon that and improve it the way that you see it, right? I know that I'm being like really, really upright and like really blunt about it here, but I think in this case, what I'm really trying to do is trying to save you some time, because I can see that further down the line, once you start building this out, you're going to start noticing all the flaws in it too. And it's not really going to make sense at that point. And that will be the point where you probably invested like a couple of weeks into the project already, where it becomes way more difficult to make a decision then, rather than doing it now when everything is like very early stages, right? So what I would do in your case is pick a concept that you like. And I'm pretty sure that you're either gonna find like concepts that are like in this direction, right? But I want you to start out with a solid foundation. Starting out with a solid foundation is going to make the rest of it so much easier. Trust me on this one. Cool. Okay, so we kind of talked about the fundamentals, right? Like the overall concept. So let's have a look at the composition itself. And then the block out. So let's try to separate those two things, right? So first of all, the composition. Composition is really straightforward. But I think you can really make like something way more interesting with the way that you kind of set it up, right? So usually, let's see, how do we want to approach this? I'm gonna try to explain what I'm thinking right now, right? Because I know that there's something off about like having the focal point in the center. It doesn't really sit well. And because it's the windmill is such a heavy object, like it kind of makes everything lean more to the left for no reason. And there's gonna be a lot of dead space here and a lot of dead space here. So what I'm thinking about is that if we off center like the heaviest object, which is the windmill, right? So if we put that somewhere off center and then focus the dead zone or like the dead area to either side, right? But I think the best one is that we have more C. That's probably going to be like a better composition. Because let's say if you have something like this, right? So I have the C, we kind of have like the big windmill over here. Big windmill, and then let's say you still have like all the built up areas here as well. With like your little palm tree over here. And then you could still use like the windmills that go into the distance to kind of emphasize like the depth of the scene, right? Because that's what really works. But that's what's so like works here. You just need to like I think it would be way better if you have like one here and then maybe one here or something like that, right? So that's the way that I would approach it. And you probably want to emphasize that more by putting them closer together. And you could have like a bit of the city here. You could have like dead zone here. And then you would have the road coming into it. Right, but now, like what I try to do is push the main focal point more towards the right. You know, so that all the heavy stuff is on the right, and at the left of the frame is more empty, right? There's going to be a lot of sea, and there's going to be less desert. That's what I try to do with this. So I try to shift the weight towards the right, and leaving more dead space, or like more area of rest on the left. So that's the way that I would approach this sort of like composition. That's the composition. And then number 3. Let's see. Number 3 was about the block out and all that stuff. Asenio, hey, how's it going? Welcome to the chat. Good to see you here. Oh, that's a great question, Tassin. I'm gonna answer that after I'm done with giving feedback to this person here, to Netrix. So we were talking about the block out, right? I'm actually gonna zoom out a little bit more and actually look at the concept and kind of break down what you try to do. Because in a way, there's a lot of stuff in this concept that is going to be very tricky to execute in a way that does it justice. So let's break it down together, right? So sea, like water, right? That's tricky. Very tricky. Because if you have like a sea where you can't see how the stuff is coming onto shore, right? Like the waves breaking and all that kind of stuff. If you can't see that, that's simple because that's just literally a plane with like a water shader onto it, right? And a water shader itself, you can make that advanced or like you can make that simple however you want. That's going to be easy. But as soon as you have some sort of water interaction between like static elements or even moving elements, that's going to be way trickier. So if you have like the sea coming onto shore, I know that you already have something here that looks pretty decent. That may or may not be from you. I'm not sure. And that looks okay-ish. So you could make that work. That's also one thing by itself, already really tricky. And then we have the core component here, right? Super dense. This is going to take a lot of time, even if you're really smart about it, right? Because you can be really smart about it and use like trim sheets and tilables and all that stuff to kind of make it work. But that would be like a different technical challenge onto itself. Same with this, right? Also really dense. Again, you can make shortcuts with that. Like you can make that work. But just overall, like you can see that you have like lots of stuff here that is going to be very, very tricky to execute and do it well. It's too big. I think it's a little bit too ambitious. There's just too much going on. So I would say in terms of block out, comparing it to your concept, right? It's pretty rudimentary, and I would probably go for something smaller. Keep in mind that I'm saying this without actually knowing your skill level, right? But I would still suggest to do something smaller. And maybe, look, maybe if you are like a senior environment artist and you know what the hell you're doing, maybe something like this could work, right? But judging from the concept that you picked, I don't think so. The concept that you made, right? Yeah. I know that this was all very blunt, right? I've been very open and very, very direct in my approach for this one. Please do keep in mind that this was all in an effort to like help you avoid like a bunch of wasted time. Because I can see the ambition and I can see the promise and I can see that you have the drive to do this sort of stuff, right? But it gets tricky when you give yourself something that is going to be so far ahead of your skill level and then you have to deliver. You're not only going to be executing things, but you're also going to be learning a bunch of things too while you're doing. So you almost have to like triple or quadruple the amount of time that you're going to spend on it, because you're going to be picking up so many different skills and so many different things to make everything look good. So yeah. Long story short, pick something smaller, start with a concept, make it easy for yourself, and then just make it look freaking good, you know? There's nothing wrong with going small and picking someone else's design and then just executing it beautifully, right? Or putting your own spin on it too. You can do that too. Yeah, Nitrix. I hope this wasn't too blunt for you. Feel free after the fact, if you want to contact me, feel free to reach out with any additional questions. I'm happy to help. And yeah, let me know. Let me know. Okay. Tassine, let's jump into your question for a little bit. Is there any future for an environment artist who makes environments with only mega scans, or should he learn modeling and substance designer too, like Victor Oman? I'll give a very general statement, right? Like there is a future for those people, but I don't think you want to be part of that future, because the easier it is to do the thing that you're doing, the more easy you're replaced as well, right? So I think if you can only like compose a scene, right? There's probably gonna be a couple of jobs for you out there, or maybe you can make your own Unreal Engine for Fortnite levels and compose them beautifully and all that stuff. But if you're looking for a professional job, you're gonna have to dive deeper into modeling, materials, level art, like biome creation, terrain sculpting. Like it kind of depends on what you want to focus on, right? But I would say that if you're just looking for a job in composing scenes, that's going to be very, very tricky. How do we get into this Discord? I think there's a link underneath the video. If you go to our website, beyondexcent.com, you can become a member there. It should have a link on the front page. Okay, thanks. It helped a lot. No worries. Yeah. The thing is, the approach that I always take is the more skills you have, the more value you add to your own skill set, right? And the more you're going to be sought after, because you can do more things, or you're more specialized in something, right? And the more valuable you become, the less easy it is to replace you at some point. So that's what I always try to focus on, is like, I'm looking for skills that I can add onto it, rather than sticking with like a very low skill barrier, if you want to call it that. Okay, last one for today. Populous. Let's have a look. I know that I keep switching between Lazar and Populous. Sorry for that. Next update. I added a bunch of stuff this time around. That's awesome. My general questions would be, my plan going further is to add more bushes and little trees along the side to add a bit more immersion. But the real question is, what do you think I should add to make this scene pop? You're having trouble connecting to the website. Oh, that's weird, because I literally was on it like before the stream. Yeah, it works. It works totally fine for me. I'll add the link here again. Interesting. So yeah, Populous. What should I add to make this scene pop more? What details in post-processing maybe even some backgrounds or backdrops? I feel like there isn't much to be done since it's a fairly small scene, but I feel like the finished feel of the scene is pretty far away. What can you add to make the scene more pop? Oh god, so there's a lot that still can be achieved in terms of lighting and details, and like you said, like a background, maybe some clouds or something like that, right? There's a lot that you can still do. So I'm probably gonna keep it like pretty vague and like pretty just idea focused, I guess. Clouds. Blending between assets. Blending assets. Clouds. A backdrop. Like a background in terms of like parallax, right? Where you have like mountains or something like that. Also, what is happening here? Like, what is happening here, right? Like, think about that, and maybe you can come up with some interesting examples or like interesting things that you can still add there to indicate what is happening there too. For example, is this beam hot? Does it burn stuff as it gets close by? Right? It's a stupid example, but that might have an effect on like all the foliage that you have around it. Because it could be cool to have like a gradient of like where the beam starts and like all the foliage is burned until it like spreads out to where it doesn't burn anymore, right? And I'm not talking about like fire particles and all that kind of stuff, but just like burned up or like maybe like flattened. You know, it doesn't have to be burned, but like does the beam affect the foliage around it, right? And how are you going to show that off? Some bushes and little trees on the side for a bit more immersion. So, think about what that means, right? Like immersion. What do you mean by that? Because it's a pretty generic word, right? Immersion. I think if you are talking about what I think you're talking about, it's not necessarily immersion, but like focusing you more on the core element of the scene, right? Because you wanna kind of block things in on the side. Because when it comes to immersion, I think these questions are more about immersion, right? Like, what are the effects from the thing that we're seeing right now on its environment? And what is happening here? Because right now, at this point, it is a pretty generic, like, green particle effect, like in the middle of like a piece of flat land, right? It's not even like a crater or something like that. There's no hole in the floor. It's just, yeah, it's just like a beam on the earth, right? So, and you can still take that like a bunch of different directions, right? You could have like a decal on the floor that shows that the beam is somehow like being like coming out of the floor, or you could have a hole in the floor, or it could just be like a shockwave that starts from somewhere. There's options here too. Also, yeah, to come back to like the background in the mountains. One way to introduce like a sense of depth is adding layers to your terrain, right? Because right now it feels like an arena. Let me actually grab it here. You have like a wall and there's no like secondary layer behind it. So it kind of just feels like it's just like, oh, it's a wall of rocks. It's like an arena almost. Probably a better way of saying it. But the way that you kind of want to make it, if we look at the top down section, right? Let's say this is your core, and you have like a rock wall here, a rock wall here, so that you get like a little bit of parallaxing happening between all the layers. Kind of like we talked about with your previous scene as well, right? With the clouds, especially, where you had like multiple layers of clouds. Apply the same sort of thinking here as well. What details in post-processing? Yeah, I think there's a lot of details. A lot of details that you can add here. Like little rocks, pebbles. Same here. Right? You have the big rock. There's no. Is there only big rocks? Because it could be nice to have like a smaller one and then maybe some pebbles surrounding it too. You know, and just add like more layering to the rocks. Make it look nice, you know? Thinking layering. Like if I were to say like one word, it's probably like gradient, right? Is where you have a gradient going from like big chunky rocks to like smaller rocks to like small pebbles. You have like a transition gradient between the surface that they're going into and like the giant rock that's coming out of the surface. Rock gradient. And then onto the next point. Also a little smaller point here. I've done these pillar sculpts in Substance Painter. They look pretty fine, but I can't help but feel they look a little bit wonky in Unreal Engine 5. I was thinking of adding more high poly meshes, like decimating the high poly in ZBrush and get a mesh with 5k polys. What do you reckon? Yeah, I mean 5k polys is not. It's not a lot, right? Especially when they're like the main thing of your scene. Like, yeah, make him a little bit more high poly, like add all those sweet details in there. That's great. And then the last point here, followed your advice on the scale. Do you feel it's more natural now? It is better. It is better, or it feels better. Look. But it's not too big of a difference, I feel. Like, I mean, it might be your choice at this point, right? But I feel like I would still, like, really overemphasize the scale of it. That this is still, like, two ways. Like, the main arches, right? So what I'm talking about is, like, this arch, and these two arches. Maybe these guys as well, because they're like former arches. If those things were like twice the scale and like they have like a bit more space, so that you really get this feel of like, man, I stumbled on like a massive archaeological find of some sorts, where these pillars are not just, because what would they be like, right? Let's say this is a little character. Chunk. Little character, so let's say, let's stack them up roughly. Let's say that's like 7 meters. I don't want to see it be like 15 meters, you know? That feels like it's imposing. But it's getting to a stage where it's getting imposing, right? Like 7 meters is like, okay, it's like stories, whatever. You know, it doesn't feel like dramatic yet. However, it depends on you, right? Like, if your goal is to have it feel like smaller or secluded, or do you want to have it feel like majestic and like really big? That's where your gut comes into place, right? So that's something. It's more a question for you than for me, really. Yeah. I think this is going to be the most important thing. The blast crater itself. Do something there, right? Like, make it a shockwave. Make it like an actual explosion happened there. You can see it on the floor and like the space ruptured open. You know, like, you can do some really cool stuff with there instead of just having like a landscape. That's just, yeah, just a landscape. There's lots of options here, man. It's gonna look awesome. Cool. I think that's gonna do it. It's gonna do it for this week. Brand Doom does have a connection. Question here. Can I ask your opinion on using your own concept art for 3D portfolio work? I mostly want a job in 3D, but I still love painting environments and characters. So, Look, the truth here is if you want to have a job in environment art, right? You want to become an environment artist, anything that you do different to that is going to distract you from that and is going to lengthen your timeline of getting in. That doesn't mean that you don't have hobbies, right? Please go out there, touch grass, have hobbies. But like if you're doing something for work, I would want to keep it as focused as possible until you get that job and then do whatever you want, right? Because once you have that job, like in most cases, I know it's kind of like a weird period to be talking about this, but like in most cases, you know that you're going to be building up proficiency in the skills that you're going to be using for the next job, right? Let's say you want to move jobs, it's going to be environment art again, probably. So you're going to be building up those skills at work. If you want to do other stuff, in my opinion, do them outside of work or have them. You can still do them, right? But don't do them for fun rather than doing them for like a professional means. For example, with your specific question of doing your own concept work for 3D portfolio work, I would probably not do that because the same thing that we talked about with Netrix today, right? Like if we look at the concept, that's all a concept that he made too, or that they made. But it's an entirely different job, right? So that's a job for a concept artist, and it's gonna require like a completely different skill set where you're thinking about, okay, who are the people in this world? How is the world gonna be? Like what are the things that are related to the current world, and how am I gonna differ for the current world? Does it still make sense? Like, does this place logically make sense? Like, who would build around like a windmill? You can make all those things work, right? But you're basically doing, world building. You're doing problem solving on like a world building scale. Whereas the job of an environment artist is to execute on those designs and on those world building pieces and turn that into 3D and add onto it, right? It's completely different from each other, especially if you work in like AAA, or your goal is to work in AAA. So that's my opinion there. Yeah, it's just way easier to use someone else's concept art, right? And I get it. You got into this because you wanted to do like your own thing, right? I think if you really struggle with following a concept, which I also did, right? So I get where everyone's coming from. What I did is I looked at concept arts that I could fix. Whenever I wasn't starting from like scratch, right? Whenever I participated in ArtStation Challenge, for example, I picked the people that were not at the top, but somewhere in the middle, because I knew that there were going to be flaws in the concept art that I could then go in and like put my own spin on and like fix up. You can do that approach too. But trying to do two jobs at the same time, you can still do it, but it's going to also double your timeline, right? So keep that in mind as you're working on it. Does that help, Brandoom? Does that help? All right. Cool. I think this is going to do it for me this week. Surprisingly shorter than I expected. Yeah, I'm probably going to hop off and probably do some more art as well. So, thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it as always. I hope you learned something. Like Aseniel was asking, if you want to become a member of our community, go check out beyondextent.com, like our website. It has all the information that you need if you want to check out some more stuff. But yeah, go check that out. And then Brandoom is saying, I do see where you're coming from. Even if you're really good at it, it makes sense to try getting into the industry first and then make your own stuff. Yeah, 100%. You know, like once you're in, like the hardest thing is getting that door to open, right? It's always the hardest thing. But once that door is open, like, oh God, like experiment with other stuff, you know? Like, that's always been my approach. Right? You basically have the choice at that point. Yeah. Thank you so much for the question, Brandoom. I'm gonna be signing off. Talk to you later, everybody. Have a nice evening and stay creative. Bye bye.